Yeah, that's Krzysztof Kieslowski. He has made a number of films. This one is a short film about killing. There's another one about love, and there's another version of the film that is called the Ten Commandments, number 5, Fifth Commandment. I don't really know if hot and cold is really the correct thing of describing these two killings, but they, in a way, they are quite opposite each other. One is an individual act of murder for robbery. For the young guy, it's a sort of personal challenge, adventure that he doesn't quite, it's not a professional killer as we see. And then there are the professional executioners who have a different approach to their killing, and it's a legal killing, everything is okay, but it also grips you somehow, and there is some stuff to think about. It's a cold, calculated execution by the state. If that is aesthetically or morally so much better. Legally, it's completely okay. The appeal has been rejected and everything is okay. So, but morally, we sort of start wondering, and that was probably the sense of the movie too. Another gripping thing is the small, very short novel by Victor Hugo of 1829, The Last Day of a Condemned Man. Similarly gripping as this movie. Were completely incredible. If you want to see something really completely incredible, that is Joshua Oppenheimer's 2012 documentary, The Act of Killing. That's about the Indonesian massacres that killed 500,000, more than 500,000 people in 1965. That was done in a way that is hard to conceive. And Anwar, the act of killing, there's a scene, Anwar on the roof, where one of these mass murderers shows how they invented methods of doing it better and faster and with less blood, etc. On top of his roof of his home. And they brought people up there who were not even thinking that something could happen to them, but they were defined as enemies. They didn't, as enemies. They didn't even know that, and then they were cold-bloodedly killed there on the roof of their house. And the way that was done, and it's being recounted by those who were the murderers, and they recounted with not the least bit of guilty conscience. They even make fun and they find it interesting, etc. So if you want to see something completely incredible, then look at that movie, The Act of Killing, by the New York documentary filmer Oppenheimer. Now, if we want to continue with things that are completely incredible, we can go also in the sense of cold killings to Heinrich Himmler in 1943. The 4th of October 1943, this chief of the SS, he was in Posen in Poland, and he was speaking to people who had been participating in the genocide that was still underway at that time. Actually, he gave 2 speeches, and the first speech, this is just a short part of the first speech. And why is this interesting? It is interesting not only because it was an inconceivable, incredible genocide, but also because of the parochial legitimation. It is enough when you have a group that has their belief system, you have a commander who says you have to believe this, and if you have followers who say, yeah, we want to believe it, and then you have this organization that gives support to you. And then even most of those who would not even want to kill anybody, but they are in war, they are in wartime, and they are being ordered to kill civilians, women, children. They are being given a parochial legitimation using a universal legitimation of self-defense. As we have already seen, self-defense is one of the few legitimate ways of killing, so it is one of the most abused rhetorical figures. When you want to kill somebody, if you want to legitimate it to other people who have to do it, but also to other people in the public. Now, I would just read it, even though it sort of freezes my blood. One basic principle must be the absolute rule for the SS men. We must be honest, decent, loyal, and comradely to members of our own blood and to nobody else. That is parochial. We have to be loyal to our group. What happens to a Russian, to a Czech, does not interest me in the slightest. What other nations can offer in the way of good blood for our type, we will take if necessary by kidnapping their children and raising them here with us. Whether nations live in prosperity or starve to death interests me only so far as we need them as slaves for our culture. Otherwise, it is of no interest to me. Whether 10,000 Russian females fall down from exhaustion while digging an anti-tank ditch interests me only insofar as the anti-tank ditch for Germany is finished. I am now referring to the evacuation of the Jews, the extermination of the Jewish people. It's one of those things that is easily said. The Jewish people are being exterminated, says every party member. This is very obvious. It's in our program. Elimination of the Jews. Extermination. We're doing it. Ha! A small matter. And then they turn up the upstanding 80 million Germans, and each one has his decent Jew. They say the others are all swines, but this particular one is a splendid Jew. But none has observed it, endured it. Most of you here know what it means when 100 corpses lie next to each other, when there are 500, or when there are 1,000. To have endured this and at the same time to have remained a decent person, with exceptions due to human weaknesses, has made us tough, and is a glorious chapter that has not and will not be spoken of, because we know how difficult it would be for us if we still had Jews as secret saboteurs, agitators, and rebel-rousers in every city. What with the bombings, with the burden, and with the hardships of the war? If the Jews were still part of the German nation, we would most likely arrive now at the state we were at in 1916 and 1917. Himmler then praises the mindset of the SS man, devoting approximately 30 of the 116 pages to their virtues as well as their duty of becoming Europe's ruling class in 20 to 30 years. What we have here is, it's only us. We have to protect our group. We have our legitimation. We must survive. and the Jews are endangering our survival for reasons that can be read in Mein Kampf. And so, and included in this necessity of self-defense is the necessity to exterminate all Jews, including women and children. One does not do that, but in this case of self-defense, we have to do it. So the self-defense trophy is being abused, once again, like so often, but in a very radical manner, hardly ever seen in written. And that exists as a tape, it seems. And that, of course, is the gruesomeness of cold killings. The cold killing is gruesome because you cannot attribute it to, well, I just lost my temper, I was overburdened at the moment, I did not do what to do. This is planned, calculated, discussed. So the gruesomeness of the cold-blooded murder, the cold act of killing, surpasses that of the gruesomeness of the taxi murder. Also, historically, in quantity, you can only kill large quantities of human beings in cold blood. And so the cold killings, they deserve our special attention. Homicide can also be contextualized within other causes of death. Now we're in April 2018, and there are estimated to be 7.6 billion humans living on Earth right now. This year, 130 million babies will be born, and 55 million people will die. Each and every hour, there are 15,000 births and 6,300 deaths in the world. Per 100,000 inhabitants, there are 1,900 births and 800 deaths per year. Of these 800 yearly deaths per 100,000 inhabitants worldwide, only 6 or 7 are due to homicide. That is less than 1% of all deaths. More than 99% of all deaths are due to other causes. Of the 55 million deaths altogether, 36 million are due to non-communicable diseases of different kinds, and more than half to the top 10 causes of death. Heart attacks and strokes combined account for 50 million deaths per year, and that has been stable over the last 18 years or so. All the other deaths, they change. There are increases and decreases, quite substantial increases and decreases. At the time being, it's like this. Chronic pulmonary diseases claim more than 3 million lives, lung cancer 1.7 million, diabetes 1.6. There was less than 1 million people dying from diabetes in the year 2000. Today it's 1.6 million. It's a steep increase in diabetes. Dementia has more than doubled between 2000 and 2015. And dementia as a cause of death, still more than 1 million, 1.5 million. Diarrhea going down on a steep decrease, but still costing 1.4 million lives. Just like tuberculosis, which is also going down, but both of them each cost 1.4 million lives per year, and road injuries 1.3. Incidentally speaking, 75% of the victims of road injuries are men and boys. That is somehow similar to homicide victims, who are also in their large majority men and young men. With 1.1 million fatalities in 2015, HIV/AIDS is no longer among the world's top 10 causes of death. War and terrorism together are on the increase, but with a yearly total of around 150,000, these causes together claim less lives than, for instance, cancer of the pancreas with 330,000, and much less than homicide, which is just below 500,000, or even breast cancer, 570,000 worldwide per year, or suicide. So war and terrorism together, they come, at least in 2015, to 150,000, and they are increasing at the moment. But 150,000, war and terrorism together, does not even come close to suicide with 800,000 casualties. So, in other words, with less than 500,000 deaths per year worldwide, homicide is far from the 10 leading causes of death, ranging somewhere between suicide and the lesser known types of cancer, very similar to bone cancer. And in terms of public health, a 50% reduction in homicides would not have the same quantitative effect as a 50% reduction of death among children under the age of 5. The category death of children under the age of 5 years has dropped significantly from, now it's below 5 million per year for the first time in modern history. In 1970, it was still 16.4 million deaths of children below 5 years in 1 year. And in 1990, it was still 11 million. Now it's below 5 million. So a 50% drop in this category has an enormous effect on public health and on the general well-being of families who either lose or don't lose a young child. So quantitatively, if we look at rates, at quantities, homicide is not the big topic. If it is the big topic, it is a big topic for other reasons, not really because it's a leading cause of death. So, in that sense, we can say that as far as homicide is concerned, it's not an imminent danger for each of us. We can say that we are relatively safe. But who is this we, and what does it mean to say that we are relatively safe? Well, that is an interesting question. Who's we? Well, for one thing, 500,000 homicides, a little less than 500,000 homicides. That might seem little compared with more than 7 billion inhabitants. But when you don't look at the rates, the picture changes. Just look at 500,000. 500,000 people who are being killed by other people. That's a lot of suffering. And it does not become less suffering because the rate is small. Just think, in the year 1350, after the Black Death and after the famine of 1315, the number of people living on Earth was much below 500,000 people. On the whole face of the Earth, there were only living 370 million people. That was all there was life, human life on Earth. And when today 500,000 people are killed by other people, compared with the whole world population of 1350, that's quite a lot. That's more than there were people to be killed in the 14th century. So there is something about homicide that makes it special, even though the rate is comparatively low compared with the diseases and even traffic accidents. Now, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, they say the study of intentional homicide is relevant not only because it is the study of the ultimate crime, whose ripple effect, the effeito cascata, goes far beyond the initial loss of human life, but because lethal violence can create a climate of fear and uncertainty. Intentional homicide also victimizes the family and the community of the victim, who can be considered secondary victims. And when justice is not served, impunity can lead to further victimization in the form of the denial of the basic human right to justice. That, I don't know if that is really hitting the point why homicide is something that worries us so much, but at least it's an attempt to explain it beyond the quantity. This must be one of the reasons why humans are so fascinated and preoccupied with murder. In the imaginary universe of mainstream mass media, homicide has become the most common cause of death, even more so in entertainment than in the news. Another reason must be that in the real world, there are segments of society and places within countries in which homicide is really the number one killer. Homicide is by far not the number one killer, as we have seen in general. But when you look at certain groups in society, suddenly homicide is the number one cause of death. And that is the case, for instance, in the United States, for black men between the ages of 15 and 34. Their homicide is number one. Then come accidents, and then comes suicide. Now, for the group of 24 to 34, suicide ranks fourth, and number 3 is already heart disease. For the Rohingya in Myanmar, you will have also probably that homicide or things related to maltreatment are the number one cause of death. At present, there is a campaign to expropriate white farmers in South Africa, especially by the Economic Freedom Party. They have a strong influence on the ANC government, and there are groups of people terrorizing white farmers. And when you look at the white farmers' risk of death, they had a death rate of, now the world average death rate is 6 or 7 for every 100,000. If you compute the white farmers to 100,000, then you have a death rate not of 6 per 100,000, but of something like 130 per 100,000. An astronomically high death rate because of this present situation. If you look at Christians in northeast Nigeria, you will have similar figures. So wherever you have these figures for a segment of society, you know there's something wrong in the structure. There is political upheaval, there's civil war, something lingering, or there is a race conflict, something like that. Something's rotten in these situations. In Western Europe, in Europe, the average homicide rate per 100,000 inhabitants is around 3. When you look at Western Europe, you come to 2 or to 1, and in some parts you come to less than 1, 0.8, 0.6. Look at Scandinavian countries, it's somewhere between 0.6 and 2 point something. The world over, the average is said to be 6, 6.2, 6.9, something like this, depending on dates and sources. Now, in parts of the world where the average homicide rate reaches 20, security issues begin to dominate everyday talk. people are sitting in bars and they're talking about security. When it comes to 30, normally politics is in a shake-up and politicians are getting nervous. Experts from foreign countries are being flown in to talk about these things. Police chiefs like William Breton, they are busy flying all over and trying to see what's going on and if they can help with their experiences. And those are very, very interesting experiences, but most of the time it doesn't work to transplant them to other places for reasons that we could discuss. And then there are a few countries in the world, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, the Caribbean islands, that go beyond that. Rates of 50, 60, sometimes 70, very seldom 80, and then normally it stops for a country and you have only segments of society like young black people in Los Angeles or things like that. Now, why is it that in Central America and in the Caribbean islands, with all their beauty and all their tourist destinations, they have these incredible homicide rates? Why in the world? I mean, you have St. Martin and St. Lucia and the Virgin Islands, the United States Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands, you have Curacao, you have Jamaica, you have the most beautiful places, honeymoon places, and they have murder rates that are beyond imagination and beyond the normal. Now, why is that? Well, somehow the United States are like a vacuum cleaner. What is this vacuum cleaner doing up there? It is vacuuming cocaine from South America, and you cannot get it to North America except if you go through Central America. What is Central America? El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, the Caribbean islands. You have to go through there. And you have all these drug gangs, and you have wars between the drug gangs, between DIA, between police, military, and drug gangs. And it's such a hassle, such a chaotic situation that things are just getting out of control. Police is shooting everybody, the drug gangs are shooting each other, the drug gangs are shooting their own traitors, and so on and so on. You just lose control of the situation. And these rates, these crime rates, these homicide rates, they just tell you that there is a loss of control of the situation. And when you look a little harder, you will find that at the bottom of it all is the prohibition of drugs. The drugs themselves, they don't shoot anybody. But the prohibition of drugs makes it that those who transport them, they have no access to law. And those to sell them, they have no access to law. And if you're in a large billion-dollar business and you have no access to law, then you must regulate your conflicts in a different manner. And there are only a limited number of ways that you can regulate conflicts. You can sit down and talk, or you can shoot. And the talking business is very complicated.